it's the 5th of April. I've come down to a very windy allotment, so I've not come here for long. I just came down to pick some purple sprouting broccoli, which won't bother videoing. It's a bit blown, to be honest, but I'll get some bits off it. Put this garlic out and just have a bit of a ponder on where other things are going to go, which you'll see over the next coming weeks where things are going to get planted, because I don't know myself yet. So this was sort of like, as I came down, and decided where these were going to go. Usually I've kind of got a plan, but I haven't this year. I've just got immense amounts of seedlings, so I've just got to work out where I can put them all. So I've gone along with a bulb planter and just basically cored holes out here. I haven't got enough garlic to fill all these holes, so I'll leave 2 little gaps down the bottom there, and I can just fill them with little clumps of spring onions or something. So it's just basically, in the pots like I originally planted them in, sort of pop them out, plenty of roots on them, and just push them in. I usually do them a little bit deeper, but not essential. They will sort of pull the self down, because I will mulch these in a few weeks. I'll just sort of hand mulch them around the edges a bit once the old weeds start to appear, and then hopefully rust leaves them alone as long as possible. Oh, pot's gone. But it is windy today. I'm growing some of the larger onions at home, the exhibition ones. They're out. They're not the Kelsey ones. I've never grown the exhibition before, so I've got some little tiny sort of pea canes for them, so I need to just pop some of them on today before this wind comes and blows them all over. So I'm hoping this will be the last batch of hard winds, cold winds anyway, because it is cold today. But, garlic's pretty hardy. It'll pull itself down to where it needs to be and everything as the season progresses. It doesn't matter if it's tilted over or anything like that. It's a bit like onions. You can near plant them on the side and they'll pull themselves up right. Now, fancy, you can trowel dig these in, of course, but as it's firm enough for me to just core these holes out. I've done that. The problem is you end up with a lot of soil left in a tub. I've still got the soil from last year's bed. It's not gone down anywhere, so I'll just crumble it up and throw it on my potato bed, I think. But it's once you've got the holes sort of dibbed out or you've marked it out, they're about 6 inches apart that way, and then they're in rows probably 8 to 9 inches. Because you can grow a little bit close together in raised beds, providing the ground's okay. And they were about this sort of spacing last year. But ideally, the more space you can give them, the better. But as long as you can get a hole down in between for weeding in the summer months, not so bad. So I can't remember when I did these. I can't remember if it was January or February I planted these. It's in the videos anyway. Quite straightforward to do, and just save some of your bulbs to plant out for next year's crop. They're in the multi-purpose compost. Bit of perlite in there because I didn't have any vermiculite earlier on in the year, but just all helps with the drainage. Because I would have put them out here direct, really, but it just gets so wet. I will have to cover these over, I think, with a net for now, because I've seen the chickens walking about, and I just don't want them sort of scratching. I never usually do, but I don't want to be at home for a few days and then come up next week and then they're all ripped out or the top's nipped off. It's a bit late to start again. You could probably just about squeeze some garlic in now if you're planting direct. I've never left it that late. It's always been March is the latest I've actually started it, because it needs the cold weather. Needs a temperature below 10 degrees, so I've known people start them in the fridge, to give them that cold snap, otherwise they don't split into all the cloves and everything. These are just like 7 centimetre pots, and they're just big enough to get by. You leave them too long and they'll start getting pot bound. I hope you can hear me okay, because I'm sort of facing the wind. I say this will just get added to the next update, whenever that may be. It's all weather permitting now. As soon as the window's there, I'll be on it. I'm not going to water these in because the beds are wet enough and these are really wet as well. Which will encourage, as this compost dries out, will encourage the roots to get down, get them going. I've done my maths right, which isn't any sort of guarantee. I should have enough. I do sort of like prefer it when it's a nice even sort of set, but like I say, unless if you plan exactly how many you need and everything germinates, it's a bit hit and miss sometimes. But yeah, so I've just got a couple of gaps, two spaces, well, one space at each end down there, really, so, well, no, 2 spaces at each end. So I can, like I say, just get some, you know, a couple of clumps of spring onions, pop them in there. I mean, while these are growing, you probably get 2 lots of spring onions out of them, really. You keep them small, they won't get in the way. It's pretty much simple as that, you know, you go ahead and fill around with them if you want that. Probably will do just to tartan it up a bit. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Because the soil will sort of weather to its own level. Oh, glad it's windy and it's a bit cold on the hands as well. That's the only problem, you put something out now and you get that cold biting wind on it. It causes problems. Something banging about over there. I think somebody's left the shed door open or something. I'll go and check it in a bit. You know, because I wasn't going to come, but I'd put these in the van ready last night, so it sort of like pushed me to like, you know, go and get it done. Get something in the ground growing. So that's it, that's the garlic for this year, and probably harvest that sort of end of June, July, dry it, and then that'll store. Still a load left from last year, and it'll store right through till probably June, July. So, yep, that's it, garlic for this year. It's the 9th of April today, and the forecast for the next 2 weeks, there's no frost as far as I can tell, but you can never be certain. So I've decided to come down today because we've got like a bit of rain in the next few days, which helps with watering things. Average daytime temperatures are sort of, you know, low to mid-teens. Nighttime temperatures are supposed to be sort of, you know, 7, 8 degrees. So it's not too bad, you know, for the, you know, some of the frost hardy things, because they're just struggling a bit at home, and you know, in the natural seed trays, you know, they're drying out quick, and they just seem to not really be, you know, putting much growth on now. So I'll get them out in the ground and then let Mother Nature deal with them. Some of them are a little bit on the small side, but I'll just take that gamble, you know, and sometimes, you know, you pay the price for it and you can lose a lot. But I thought, you know, last year I took a gamble and it kind of semi-backfired a bit, you know, kind of things got a bit checked for a few weeks because we had a cold April, but the weather forecast says, you know, so far it's not going to be like that for the next couple of weeks, so it'll help them harden up if it doesn't get any real cold, or we've just passed some heavy winds, so there's no real heavy winds. There is a little bit of wind due, so a nice breeze today, but obviously when things are behind the nets and the low down, I've got a net fencing, it does shield quite a little bit, and also these nets, they do offer a little bit of thermal protection, not much, but you know, something's better than nothing. So at the end of today, hopefully today, everything will be planted up. The only gap there will be probably at the end of where the garlic is. There'll be a little tiny gap at the end of that, which will be where possibly, nothing set in stone yet, with a sweet corn will go in about 5-6 weeks time. I'm not sowing the frost tender stuff yet. That will probably happen in about a week, to get things going. Obviously tomato plants need potting on into the final pots, and they can start going into the polytunnel to slowly harden off, just keeping an eye on the temperatures. But so I'm hoping to get the brassicas planted, onions planted, peas in the gutters, they can go in. I think they were sown on the 20th of last month, so you know, they're they're ready. They're not getting much bigger. They've started putting tendrils out. So I thought, you know, I was down here the other day. I put one row of potatoes in, the Duke of Yorks, and I dug the other 2 trenches just to see how the soil looks underneath. And it's not sodden with water, so it's dry enough. That's the big issue on here. Things flood, and then we'd had a lot of rain. So when I dug it, I half expected to see a lot of water, you know, seeping through, but it's not. I thought, you know, the thing I've got to watch now is things like moles and voles, because they've started to show some signs. So as long as they don't start tunnelling in the beds too much, I don't mind. But obviously, warmer weather, worms get a bit more active and things start waking up, animal-wise. So, you know, the net's offer protection, because you can get butterflies out this time of year, obviously moths and things like that, you know, they're wanting to lay eggs. You know, whitefly, it's still sort of around, but nothing major at the moment. But I had a problem with that last year, so it's just things, you know, Mother Nature throw at you. So I think get the plants in, you know, fairly young, and they'll find their way. I'm pretty confident that they'll do okay. I'm not saying they're going to do great, but you never know. It's a lot of luck, because you know, one thing you can't predict is the weather. And April is a month, you know, it is ready, but it can still be cold. There is still an element of risk for this month here in the UK. I'm in zone, I think it's 8B. Like I say, the forecast says it's not too bad. And things that I've got planted in the back garden, like the greens and the lettuce, they've survived. You know, they're growing. You know, because usually when you put things in, there's probably a week to 2 weeks, like I call it, a sulking period, where they don't tend to do much. And it's because they're busy trying to get new roots out into the ground, which is why if you leave things in pots for a bit too long, which I've done in the past, you know, it gets full of roots, and you put it in and there's a dry spell, and you can water it in really well, but there's not enough root ball to keep it alive. It needs to get roots into the soil, because that's where the moisture is. So that pot sort of compost dries out quick, and it hasn't got enough time to sort of keep the plant alive while it gets new roots out. Which I'm worried about my onions, because it's only a little tiny module tray. But luckily we're forecast, you know, some sunny spells, you know, and some rain all this next week, which will all help, you know, to keep things sort of damp. But obviously the beds are still damp. You know, they look dry on top, but they're dampish underneath. You know, I will give everything a good watering today, and I'll probably come up in a couple of days and just see how things are going. There's nothing that seriously yellowing off. You know, 'cause sometimes wind chill, you get a real biting wind that can pale things off. It did it with my peas and some brassicas last year, but it's not forecast, so but you just don't know. It's a gamble. So I thought, you know what, I'll get it in, and then I can get the polytunnel tied at home and start concentrating on the frost tender stuff and the rest of the season. You know, I can get on with a few jobs there, you know, and start tidying up that end of the plot, because it's a bit of a mess. But while things are in growing, then I can. They're all covered with nets. I came down the other day, did the spuds, and I built all the nets. So every bed has a net on it up this end. A temporary one for the onions. It's that sort of bit of wind protection, and if any birds want to come down, start nipping the tops off, which can happen. Peas are going to be exposed, so if rabbits come and chew them off, or the chickens get in and start gnawing them, there's nothing I can do about that. But once they get roots into that soil, they'll be off. And you know, it's just a case of putting a bit of string across the front and keep and pull back until they've got a good grip on this netting, which is, I think it's a bit like cheap goalpost netting, this really. If I can find the link, I'll put it in the description. The squares on this, they're about 100mm square. Well, yeah, say 100mm square. These, it's great netting. I can't be doing with that green nylon stuff. It's a nightmare. I hate it. I used to mess about with that. You'd just be in a big tangle. It just wouldn't be right. But this stuff lasts for years, probably, I don't know, 10 years of stuff at least. You know, it's still strong as out now. Obviously crop rotation, I think I've done peas in here, it's probably about 3rd, 4th year, you know, but they still grow, you know. So until I have a problem, then, you know, I've not had any real issues regarding crop rotation. I don't follow a serious, you know, religious rotation. Seeing other things in the beds do move, you know. Where my onions are going to go, in the red onions which are going in that bed there, I don't think that's had any sort of alliums in for quite a while. Obviously the onions were in this bed last year, had a few problems, so this is going to be, these two beds are going to be the cauliflower and broccoli, and the onions are going to go up in this one, the white onions. So there's hundreds of things to plant, you know, especially onions anyway. But I think there's about 130 odd white onions and about 80 red onions. Cabbages are going to go in here. I've got some of the Rogoletto and the Primo too. I'm expecting the Primo 2 and the broccoli to be ready probably first half of June, provided we don't get any issues, and then the side shoots, which will carry over until the cauliflower's ready, which is kind of end of June, mid-July. But then I'll be sowing sort of end of May, June, ready to do a second run of the same pretty much. And then you start looking at obviously beans and things like that. So I don't know when I'm going to do beans yet. I've not sorted out a bed down there, but once everything's growing, it gives me a chance to sort that bed out down there if I'm building it to grow in this season, or if I'm going to do it at the end of the season. Because some of the raspberries have come up, but they're not great. So I'll probably just sack that end off, put probably a single raised bed. I might just put some late salads in it, something like that, just to tickle it over, I don't know. But that's up there, it's an optional extra, and it's work I don't have to do right now. But I do need to get these in, get the fence sort of a bit more stable, sort my asparagus frame out because that's getting a bit rickety. Because the asparagus start coming through, you know, so I'll probably just leave it be for this side of the season and deal with that at a later date. So we'll crack on. I'm not going to film everything because it'll bore you to death, putting hundreds of plants in. I'll probably just film a few bits and probably, putting some potatoes in. But hopefully at the end of this video, the plot will be planted, which is a massive relief. It's sort of like, it's the season's begun then. Providing you get no problems within the next sort of 3 weeks for me, then it's kind of okay. It's out of that risk so much, because you might get a late cold snap here, but if the plants have been sort of, warm and they've had a little bit of cold weather, they will harden up and they will be okay. It's only when they're really tiny that they're a bit vulnerable. Obviously, you get that wind, it can dry them out. So as long as they've got roots in that moisture and a little bit of rocking about in the wind will just help them sturdy up. And like I say, I don't baby my plants, so they should, it's a bit of tough love. And I've done my bit. I've got them up to so big, put them in there, and then it's up to them and Mother Nature. And there's nothing more I can do apart from just hope for the best. Right, so we'll crack on with some jobs and see what we get done today. Hopefully everything will be done. Right, first job I'm going to do, I'm going to waz these peas in because hopefully it should go nice and easy. So I basically just really give these a right good drench. I mean, literally like, 5 litres of water per sort of, section of gutter. And the idea of that is it kind of helps them slide. Sometimes you have to sort of click the sides open a bit. I'm hoping with the weight of it, a good shunt and it'll send it sliding. I made a little hollow, which I did the other day, and I've just gone along it with a rake and sort of just evened it out. So fingers crossed. It comes out easy. So these are the ones that I sowed in the previous video. They're quite small, but they're quite robust, if you know what I mean, because they've been outside. They've had a bit of knockabout in the wind and rain on and stuff like that. So they look fairly healthy. It's just a case of trying to get them started. And then just back it up like that. And it's pretty straightforward, really, when they come out easy. I mean, some people drill holes in the bottom for drainage, which is fine. I don't think you really have much problem with them coming out, but for me personally, I just think if I've got little holes and some roots come dangling through, just more for it to grab onto. Trying to do a full length of gutter, it can be a bit tricky, so that's why I do 5-foot sections. And this row is just slightly a little bit too long usually. So I always end up with a little bit short at one end, but I'm not too bothered. I've kind of brought it back about 6 inches at this end anyway. And hopefully these will be ready, June. And then I can think about sowing some more for a second run. These are Hurst Greenshaft. It's just it'd be good if you could plant you can do cut and come salads the same way if you want as well. The gutter, I've seen that done before. Not done it myself because, like I say, you can't depend on it being quite dense root wise to get them all in. So these got a lot of water on them, and don't worry about it because it'll all drain. Like I say, just kind of hoping that you get left alone, no real pest issues. It kind of all sits in nicely like that. I'm not too worried about the back. I'll water them in a minute anyway, just to settle them in. But I'll just go along the front with my trusty rake, my favourite sort of gardening tool this really. I think the rake's most sort of universal, I found, for me. Just go along and just brush it up against it. It doesn't matter if they get covered in a bit of soil, the tips will carry on going. You know, I might put a bit of a string over the top of them, or a few strings across the general area, just to, you know, prevent. Mainly pigeons can be a bit of a pain. But usually I've always sort of managed to avoid a lot of the pests. And even if the tops get nipped, you know, the roots are there, you know, and they usually sort of get going after a while. No feeding here, nothing, just whatever compost I put on top of it. It's gradually sort of rotted into it. So just a bit of hand weeding, you know, in the season, and they'll be fine. It's just a case of just throwing a watering can across a lot of it just to settle them in. You know, I don't think there's going to be any issues. There's a lot of weight in there with that water anyway. This will just help sort of wash some excess soil in. Just dunk your watering can like right on it. Give them as much water as you like, because it's probably the first and only water they'll get. I'm a big believer in if your soil's okay and the weather is kind of, you know, usual for UK, but it rains a bit, things are okay on their own. Another watering can, and then I think that'll do. Ideally, I'll do it from the other side, but when I sort them spuds out, I'll just obviously I've got to rake some of this soil up for mounding and that, so it'll all get washed in. And as soon as the rains come, a bit of wind erosion and that, it all kind of washes it all flat into place. But for now, that's the peas done. Easy as that. Only if everything was like that, it'd be much easier. Right, I'm going to plant these white onions, the variety Santero, which I sowed back in February, in these little tiny module trays. Like I said, there's not much in the way of compost, you know, and they're definitely getting ready because there's, you know, ample roots there, get them nestled in. Hopefully I don't have the problems with them rotting off this year, but you never know. As long as any start rotting, I've got to get them out so it doesn't spread across. Because I had a lot of problems with it last year, but I had other problems with onions as well early on in the season last year. So I'm going to use a dibber. For those who don't know, that's a dibber. That's a small seedling dibber. And then you can make your own out of a broken spade handle, because, you know, when you've been doing it years, you always get a spade that starts to break. Just get a wood saw and kind of cut it at the general angle, scrape it on a rough brick, or use a wood rasp. Or if you know someone who's got a sander and that, they can bevel it off. And that's ideal for like your 40 cell module tray size, you know, and you can actually use it if you just dip down so far for, like, you know, bigger seeds, you know, like sweet corn, things like that. So I've kind of just dampened this top, because if it's a bit dry it can fall in the hole when you're dipping, because it's only a small hole. I'm going to plant them just ever so slightly deeper than what they are. So it's fairly straightforward spacings. I'm doing it a little bit different spacing wise this year. I usually go like 6 by 7, but I'm going to go 5 inches apart in a row, and the row's about 10 inches apart, somewhere like that, because I should be able to get maybe 6 rows in this bed, I don't know. We'll see. So I'm just going to plant this first row and then work out the spacings across the rest of the bed, and see what I can get in. Just basically maximise, because onions, you know, if you want big onions, yeah, give them loads of space. If you want medium size, you don't have to. You know, you can bulk, you know, bunch. So, you know, normal onions like 3 or 4 onions, and they'll grow in a little clump. You know, it just depends what you want, because sometimes some onions are a bit big. You know, if you don't want a full onion for yourself, so some small ones, you know, and I find smaller ones tend to store better as well, to be honest. So just I've got my tape measure here, just because I'm fussy and I like to try and get things as even as possible. Just going to push it down like that. I'll dim a few holes for now. It's got 5. First row is kind of 5 inches in each way. You know, I've got a board somewhere with I usually put markings on. I'll usually go along and a bit of marker pen and mark them. It's like my spuds, I didn't bother marking this year. I just sort of the first earlies I had them up, because I always do my first earlies potatoes a little bit closer. I tend to do them like, you know, maybe 10 inches apart. Now they should be just about deep enough. So once the roots are in, they'll pull themselves right. Onions tend to do that. And then just simply go along and poke a few of these out. There's always a few that are a bit reluctant, that's why I like to try and let these dry out a tad. You know, but if you pull them out and the roots come out, don't worry too much. You can just sort of like, it's a bit like pricking it out, I guess. You know, you just pop it back in. You know, because they do get a bit sticky, and some of these are still a bit damp. You simply drop it in like so, and then repeat that. So they're not much deeper. You get the odd one. You know, if you've got really fine soil and that, then yeah, it's okay. But these tend to want to fill back in sometimes. You know, I'll give them a good water in after as well, because obviously this compost in here is quite dry on some of them, so you know, but a couple of days rain will help them along. I mean, there's plenty of roots on that. You know, some of these are quite desperate to get out. And they will most of them will be okay. I've always got a few extra anyway, should any sort of limp over, because it does happen. You know, if they get a bit of a dry hit on them, they'll suffer a bit. You know, for some reason I can't get down to water them. I'll just carry on doing the rest of this bed. I don't know how many I'll get in, probably about 130 odd. I've probably got about 140 odd seedlings, I think. And hopefully, if they all do alright, I'll have plenty of onions. But if I can get like a good 60-70% of them, I'm happy with that. Right, so I'll do the rest of these. I'm going to do the red onions exactly the same, but they'll be in a different bed. Same spacings, just a smaller bed over there, so I'll probably get maybe about 80 in there. Right, I finished all the onions in. I didn't have quite enough to fill that back bed over there, so I'll put a row of spring onions, just so I've got a few backup onions, because I'll pot them on into the sort of 40 cell trays, just to give me some backup should any of these fails or a gap come available. I can sneak a little row of onions in maybe in 3 or 4 weeks time. So I've not worked out the spacings on these. I've just placed the pots, because usually I'd measure them for this, but because this is kind of an overspill bed, I've got 5 of the Golden Acre, the Primo 2 cabbage. I'm doing 9 of the Rogoletto, because I did them last year for the first time, and they stand really well, to be honest. Like a Savoy cabbage. It's like an early Savoy. Obviously, the closer you plant them, the smaller they'll be. So, you know, they're probably, you know, they're quite wide. They're good 18-inch across there and probably 16-inch that way. So they've got a decent space. These I'm just doing like a bit of 5-a-dice just to try and get more space. So if I put 3 here, these will be a bit too crowded. So, got the old drinking straws on the stems, which is handy for colour coding. So the greens are obviously the Rogoletto and the yellows are the Golden Acre, the Primo 2. That's basically because I have a problem with leather jackets, which could go along my onions and chew them off as well, but we haven't really done in the past. But if I start finding tops laying on the surface of the compost, then I'm in trouble then. But it couldn't be easier for these. The drinking straws they're not 100% guaranteed, but I don't tend to have much problem with the leather jackets. I used to lose near enough everything, just shear them off at the top. I'm hoping they've cleared off, because I keep the grass away from the pass now, which seemed to, when they were all grass pass, they seem to be quite localised in the bed. But as it warms up, they'll start coming to the surface. It's basically the larvae of the crane fly, you know, the daddy longlegs. But hopefully, if all, you know, I've got some backups of these, not so many. I've only got one Rogoletto, but I've got like another 5 of the Primo too if I need them. So I'll just pot everything I've got left over. I'll pot on into you know, an next size up pot, you know, probably like a 3-inch pot, and then if I find space, I'll use them. If I don't, I'll give them away then. It couldn't be easy. Just make a little hole, bury them a little bit deeper. You know, it's good because it's all white stuff there, mycelium, and they're the fungi, which is all good. And it's usually when I'm planting, if I start seeing the leather jackets, then I think, you know, oh dear, but they are quite tricky to spot. Just going to put some loose compost back in the bottom of there. You know, because once these have grown a bit, you can tread them in a bit more then if you want. But these beds are fairly firm anyway. So with any of the brassicas, give them a good firm down. That just helps them to grow. And as I say, as long as that drinking straw's near the top there, it should leave it alone. Nothing's guaranteed. Plenty of worms, which is always nice to see. They're not pot bound, these, but they've got quite a good root system on them. It's nice to put a little bit of loose stuff down the bottom, so when you push it down, it kind of, you know, cross webs into the existing compost. So, and then as these grow, the drinking straws will ping open, and they've got a woody enough stem then. That's it. Once the stem's tough enough, they will leave it alone. But if I do find a leather jacket, I will show you, because it have caused me a lot of problems over the years on here. Plenty of worms though, tiny worms. Still there. Giving everything a water in, and then I'll water it all again before I drop the nets down. I've not seen any butterflies around. It's a little bit early, but might get some early one trying it on. I remember rightly, it's pretty much how I planted this bed earlier than last year. I had the Primo 2 and ended up putting the leftovers in the polytunnel. Because I will have sort of a bed vacant at home, which is kind of for sprouts, but I don't know. See, you might end up having like overspill of cauliflower and stuff like that, and I don't know yet. That's the Primo 2. I'll be doing all the cauliflower and the broccoli exactly the same. I might try some sort of wider spacings. I usually put, you know, I can get up to 32 brassicas in one of my main beds, but or 24 if I space them a bit more. So I might do a bit of both just to compare. Yeah, because usually I'd measure it all out so it's all nice and even, but I don't know, I'll just bung them in and see what happens. All I'll do as these get a bit bigger, I'll just tread them in a bit more maybe. Won't do them any harm. probably do better in the ground here than being at home where one minute they're soaked and then next minute they're drying out. At least here they'll have a bit more of a consistent sort of moisture. There's a bit of a root ball off here, like an old Rogoletto that. No club root or anything here as yet, so not too concerned. Yeah, because the old leather jackets at night, they come out on the surface and they'll go along and they shear it off. I don't tend to do anything else apart from that, to be honest. Just like tender shoots and roots. In years gone by, I know they've attacked the raspberry canes as the tips are trying to grow. Plenty of big worms in here, so I'm surprised the mole's not come up yet. It's usually the case when you put a load of manure on a bed or something like that and it's full of worms. The old mole comes and has a visit. A little bit close to them too, but not bothered. Be fine. You obviously have quite a big cabbage these. You know, they'll have a big spread on them. You know, it's okay giving everything, you know, like it says, it's 3 foot apart and stuff like that, but I just think exposed soil, you know, these have got the upper hand compared to the weeds at the moment, so once the canopy grows up, it kind of blocks the light off to the weeds, so it makes obviously the weeds a little bit less to deal with. So I'll give them a watering now and I'll leave a net off, I'll just keep an eye, and then I'll water them in again after. Right, it's the last of the brassicas. This is a cauliflower. I'm doing them in just 3 rows rather than trying to squeeze 4 in. I've got I think it's 6 rows of Clapton and the last 2 rows are Tirza, I think they're called, which were, because I didn't have any more Clapton seeds, so I thought I'll try them because I had them left over from last year and I remember they were okay. So you got to try these things, you know, see which one does best, you know, because they're in the same bed, same spacings. Them Tirza are probably 3 or 4 weeks younger. That's why they're a bit smaller, but they'll catch up. You know, they'll crop within a similar sort of time. I think they are an earlier one, to be honest, so they might crop at the same time, which is quite handy, to be honest. So spacings, they're about 18 inch by 15 inch that way. But the same as the other brassicas. I have found one leather jacket so far, which I'll show you in a bit, if I can find it. I stashed it in a pot. Just when I was planting my broccoli. So they are here, but not in vast numbers, thank God. There's nothing wrong with, like, if you need to come back in a few weeks and you can hill these up slightly. You know, but these beds are pretty firm anyway. He's had the January King and everything in through the winter, so there's nothing lurking around in the soil. It should be fine. Soil's pretty wet, so you don't need a real heavy watering. I should imagine these Clapton will be glad to get the roots into some fresh soil. I'm still trying to get used to this peat-free compost. You know, 'cause sometimes it looks dark on top, but it's actually quite dry underneath, so you just have to adapt to it. But I'm sure it'll be fine. But a good thing to see though is there are plenty of worms. So they're not like the red wriggly things, like dendrovenas. They're more like just a standard earthworm, which like feeding on actually some microbes and fungi. You know, if you get the big lobworms, then they leave the big casts. They sort of go down deep. But it is a bit of an impossible task trying to get all this planted out in one day, but we'll see how we go. And this isn't the hard work bit, the potatoes will be hard work. So even if I get all my secondaries in, just leave my main crops, do them anytime over the next few days. You know, I just don't want to be doing it when it's raining. It's quite soily and loamy this, considering it's never had any soil put on it. It's all like no dig stuff, so just worms have brought it up from beneath. But they have been good beds, to be honest. Pretty mature now, almost 10 years old. Probably the amount of stuff I've put into them over the years. It should be you'd think it'd be a lot higher, but it soon vanishes down. You know, 'cause you think your bed's sat on the top of the soil, but it's actually a portion of the soil underneath. As it works in, you know, I could dig like a spade full of soil out my path, and then a spade out the bed, and you kind of see that the soil will be a lot darker underneath the bed than where the path is. We'll just have to see how the Tirza get on, because as I said, they're quite small. I don't usually plant them out that small, usually more like this size at the smallest. Like a little white maggot there. You'll always get a few pests and whatnot in your raised beds and your ground. Natural balance. It's so nice to get stuff in the ground again. It's been tricky to get going this year, and all the bad weather and everything. High winds, and finally things start springing to life. You know, and you just have to begin. It doesn't take long, and then the old bug gets you, then you. But fingers crossed everything does alright. You can't do anything but try. It's not particularly difficult. You know, I wouldn't say there's that much. This knowledge base is a hell of a lot of luck in gardening. least getting these in now, I can concentrate on the music stuff a bit, because I've got another gig coming up this weekend. Just a charity gig. Also for a good cause. I'll plant these and water these, and then there was my beetroot, and my beetroot's not really, I'm not going to film that, it's just sown in clusters, and I'll just put it probably, I don't know, clumps, 6 inches apart, just up by the garlic, bearing in mind I'll leave enough space for when my sweet corn comes down. I won't get too much wind rocking these about until they've stirred up a little bit. The tops are quite soft. They have been outside and had a bit of a rock about. First time in years I've actually not got a string line out. I just laid a bit of wood down, gouged the line out with my trowel. A bit of guesswork really. Oh, don't matter. Still looks fairly neat and tidy. Some places a bit softer. I think that's where the old moles have been. Voles and field mice and everything tunnelling around, which you don't mind, but you don't want putting big air pockets underneath your plants because the roots will prune off. Once you sort of like sit and have a think where you're going to plant stuff, once you actually commit to it, it doesn't take long then. Just try your best to think ahead what you might be planting further down the line. This is a lot of brassicas and a lot of onions. But they're crops that don't need to be harvested, obviously sort of regular, because this is like 9 to 10 miles away from where I live. You have to take travel and fuel into the whole sort of self-sufficiency side of it, and it has to be made worthwhile, so the more you can get done in a day. And the sort of crops you put up here are ones that kind of like put in, leave them to their own thing, and they're fairly hardy. Then you don't have to be up here trying to maintain and pamper them, stuff like that. I don't do my lettuce up here. Sometimes I'll put a few fillers in, but I don't intend coming up here that often. But I'll give them a quick watering. So they're pretty wet these anyway, so. It's a lot easier having these hoops already built up. Not worse when you had all day rushing about and you get everything planted and you think, oh no, I'm going to cover it all up now. Because I daren't leave it for a single day without a net over it really. It's a bit asking for trouble. I'll sling some more water over all the beds just before I go. So we forecast rain overnight, So that's brassicas, well, the cauliflower, and the rest of the brassicas, the broccoli. So I'll put this beetroot in them and have a quick look around at what I've done so far. I've just put a raw beetroot in, there's 7 there. Spaced them out a bit more than I normally would, but there's only me who eats it at home anyway, so there's garlic there from the other day. And I filled in, I had 3 gaps. Down there, I had 2 here and 1 over there. I had 3 bunches of spring onions left over, so I just popped them in. So just like a little gap filler. Sweet corn will go here, so there'll obviously be a row going in between here. And then probably spaced about 15 inches apart, and probably get 5 rows of sweet corn, 5 by 5 or 25. I'll say I've not sown it yet, so there's nothing set in stone. You know, I look at it that everywhere's full now, and that's the only area of bed I've got. It's probably like 5 foot by 5 foot square. You know, I've got some rocket I could put in for now at home, some lettuce, stuff like that. So some radish. Put anything in there because my sweet corn's not going to come up here for, well, probably a month and a half, and end of May or something like that. There's not planned for anywhere for beans yet. Like I say, it's an ongoing thing. So sorry about the noise. The road's getting busy because it's that time of day where people are out and about. So that's I managed to find it. That's the culprit, the leather jacket. So they don't look like much, but they can cause absolute havoc. They live predominantly in grassland, you know, which obviously I'm absolutely surrounded by. But so you get yellow patches and stuff like that. It's a bit like the chafer grubs do on lawns, eat all the roots and stuff like that. And it's just a nightmare. Similar to cutworms, but these hatch into the daddy longlegs. And you'll lose the top of your plant, and just around it, just under the surface, you'll find one of them. And that's all. They just chew it off right at the stem where it meets the soil. They don't seem to do anything else with the rest of it. Obviously, a seedling that's taking you 4 weeks to grow, or 6 weeks, just been killed by one of them. So that's why I do the drinking straws. Right, let's have a look at everything now. Right, so the garlic there's 60 garlic. And down there we've got the 24, yep, 24 cauliflower. Broccoli I've spaced like I've done a 4, a 3, a 4, a 3, 4, 3, 4, 3. So I think, you know, 28 in there, 28 broccoli. All the Aquiles, which is what I usually grow. And then we've got this bed over here, which has got the 5 Primo 2 and the 9 Rogoletto. I've got some spring onions planted there. That variety is called Feast. I've never grown it before because the Ishikura are a bit rubbish for germination and I haven't got any more seed. And then right underneath there, probably just about make some of them out. The red onions, the red spark. How many rolls have I got in there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Trying to count it is now. 5, 15, 65, 75. 75 red onions. And in that one, I think there's 144 white onions. So there's plenty of onions. And I've got obviously the exhibition ones at home. But I've got some things left over. But obviously the peas are, you know, you saw me put them in. Everything's out of water, so I'll probably give everything a quick splash afterwards. So I've just got the seed potatoes to put in. Got Orla and the Morris pear over there. It's quite simple, you know. I dug 2 trenches the other day and I just placed the spuds. They're a little bit close, but you know, should be a foot really, but probably about 10 inches. But I don't mind some small ones on their Jazzys, and then we've got the Charlottes there. So plenty of spuds, and then obviously I've got another 3 rows to do over there, which will be obviously 1 Morris pear and 2 Orla, because the Orla are the main crop. So that's going to be some back-breaking work. But yeah, so you do, dig a trench, and then I'll be raking it in a minute, and then just earth it up so it's like a ridge. So it kind of looks a bit like that, but you know, with potatoes underneath it. I'll move all that soil onto here, and I'll take a bit from each side to create a hill. I ideally want a hill that's probably, by the time it's finished, about 6 to 8 inches high, because most of your spuds will be in that hill. You know, they'll take at least a month before they come to the surface, I should imagine. So that gives it a month for the frost to have cleared off, which is about right, really. You know, because I'm going to hill them up as well. So, you know, it gives it a bit more time. Or I could just keep it level, and then in probably about 3 weeks, keep going. The minute I start seeing some poking up, fill them up, you know, because frost will kill the tips, but they'll kind of recover to a degree. And so in the fruit cage, some of those purple sprouting, I'll probably get rid of that now. It's a few little pickings on it, but not much. But the blueberries have gone mental with flowers. You know, all these buds, so if they all pollinate, I should get a decent crop of blueberries this year. And there's no mole been tunnelling around in there yet. Right, so I'm just going to fill these in now. They've had a little bit of bloodfish and bone meal, just put it at the bottom of the trench, not much though. You know, and they'll end up probably, they're about, you know, 5-6 inches deep. You know, I would usually break this up a bit more, but they'll find their way through. Just sort of like steadily filling over the tops, just so you don't knock any of the chits off, and once they're kind of covered, be okay to push the rest in then. You know, try keeping most of the manure to the top of the soil, because it's still probably a bit quite fresh. You know, because you're wondering whether the ground's warm enough yet, but there are a couple of volunteer spuds that had actually sprouted in the ground, so they're doing it. I don't see why these won't. I was going to dig some more the other day, but obviously this west mound is it's in the way. The rows are about 2 foot apart, then, and the main crop will be about 30 inches. I'll just get on with this and get as many planted as I can today. Like I said, I have to come back tomorrow. It's supposed to be fairly nice tomorrow. You know, I've just got some spuds to put in, you know, and have a bit of a check on things. I'll bring a few other bits up with me just to fill that other bed over there where the garlic is. So I'll carry on with the rest of this. Not put boring you to death with saying this, it's quite straightforward. And hopefully everything grows alright, you know, because it's out of my hands then really, it's down to Mother Nature. Let's just dropping these nets down shortly. And then hopefully things will grow. So thanks for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next video. See you now, bye bye.